Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Assalamu alaikum, good evening. It's a real pleasure for me to be here, as always, at this Peace and Unity Conference. And I want to begin this evening by thanking all of you for being here and thanking, of course, everyone from the Al Bayt Society for organising what has become an annual event, and a very welcome annual event that takes place here in our biggest city. The presence of so many very distinguished guests here this evening from right across Scottish society underlines the importance of this event. And it also indicates, I hope, our strong shared commitment to those values of peace and unity, those important values that this conference seeks to promote. Those values are ones which all of us in our different roles and in our different walks of life have a duty to promote at any time. But I'm sure I'm not the only one, and the Lord Provost has already alluded to this. I'm not the only one who thinks that at this moment in history that we are living through right now, promoting and standing for those values of peace and unity is more important than ever. I want to start with a message that many of you, all of you perhaps, will have heard me convey many, many times in the past, but I will never tire of conveying this message because it is an important one. It's an important one for people across our country to hear, but it is also an important one for people elsewhere in the world to hear about our country. And that message is simple. Diversity is a strength, not a weakness. We should celebrate the diversity of our country, and we should see those who want to come and live in our country as paying us a compliment. I loathe and abhor much of the narrative in modern day societies around immigration. As a country, if somebody wants to come and settle here in Scotland and make a contribution to life here, we should treat that as a compliment to our country. And we should say to those, whether they are from generations of Indigenous Scots or whether their families came here more recently in recent decades, or whether they are new to our country in very recent times, the message we should send out is that that is something to be proud of. And I hope that all of us unite in sending that message. Of course, it's a message that is not always heard or shared across the world we live in today. In recent years and in countries across the world, we have seen a re-emergence and at times an emboldening of the forces of intolerance and division. That is obviously a huge source of concern. You know, history teaches us all too clearly the appalling consequences when hate and prejudice become normalised in a society. When we take our eyes off those principles of peace, diversity, tolerance and unity and allow hate and prejudice to fester, history tells us what the consequences are. A couple of years ago, I visited the memorial in Srebrenica, where around 8,000 mainly Muslim men and boys were massacred in the genocide that took place there. And just last week, I, with a group of Scottish school children, visited Auschwitz in Birkenau and visited that site where more than 1 million Jews were murdered. And although you prepare yourself for visits of that nature, nothing can adequately prepare you for the impact that visiting sites like those have on you. But one of the things on both of those visits that I found myself thinking about, and I hope it's something everybody who visits those sites or everybody in general reflects on often, that the genocides that happened there in Srebrenica and in Auschwitz and other concentration camps, Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War, those genocides didn't start there. They ended there. The forces that led to them started in the everyday hate and discrimination and intolerance that was allowed to fester in those societies. So the lessons of that are all too clear. As a society, we can never afford to be complacent. We can never, ever simply be bystanders when we witness hatred, injustice or prejudice. We must take every opportunity to tackle racism and discrimination in all of its forms wherever we find it. And one important way that we can do that here at home is by showing zero tolerance when it comes to hate crime. And that's the approach the Scottish Government is taking and will always take. A couple of months ago, and many of you will have seen some of these posters, along with Police Scotland, we launched a very striking national campaign. And that sent a clear, unequivocal message to those espousing bigotry that their hate is not welcome in our country. It also encouraged more victims and witnesses of hate crime to come forward to report those incidents. And alongside that, we are taking steps to ensure that when hate crime is reported, we have the laws in place which allows our justice system to deal with it effectively. Our consultation on a new hate crime bill will be launched later this year. However, we know that the best way of eradicating hate crime is to tackle everyday intolerance and prejudice throughout our society. And the Scottish Government makes that a priority every day. We invest heavily to promote equality and tackle discrimination. We make, as I mentioned earlier on in my remarks, we make the positive case for inward migration to our country, just as we make the positive case for people from Scotland to be able to travel, live, study, work in other countries across the world. And it's why in recent times we published the Race Equality Action Plan, which outlines a number of actions that we will take over the course of this session of Parliament to tackle racial inequalities across every aspect of life here in Scotland. And one of the key areas of that action plan is education, which is also the theme of this evening's conference. Teaching young people about tolerance and respect is a vital part of creating a better society. We know that attitudes that are fostered in childhood or in the classroom are likely to carry on into somebody's later life. So we must do everything we can to ensure that young people understand and live by those values of tolerance and respect, peace and unity. And one of the ways in which we seek to do that is by tackling bullying in all of its forms. It's actually a particularly important and appropriate time to be talking about that issue. As many of you may know, next week is Anti-Bullying Week in Scotland. And during last year's Anti-Bullying Week, we published an updated version of our anti-bullying guidance, Respect for All. And that guidance rightly places a central focus on prejudice-based bullying. As a result of that, all schools have information on the different kinds of bullying and the approaches that they are expected to take to tackle them. We also support an anti-bullying service to work with councils and other organisations. And as a result of all of that, we hope that teachers and students have more confidence in tackling bullying behaviour, because it is not acceptable for anyone in our schools, any young person, because of who they are or where they come from, their faith, the colour of their skin, their sexuality, to find themselves in a situation of bullying. So education is at the heart of the work we must come together to do, to make sure that although we pride ourselves on Scotland being an open and inclusive and tolerant country, we are never complacent, that we are vigilant and robust in tackling hate crime, and we are taking the steps to ensure that we're raising the next generation to practice those principles of tolerance and respect. So these issues, as I said at the outset, are important every day at all times. But the world we live in today makes them all the more important. These values are under threat in our world in a way that they haven't been in my lifetime. And that puts a responsibility on all of us to be the beacons of light in all of this. Scotland is a small country in relative terms, but that does not mean we cannot be a leader here at home and globally for these important principles of diversity, tolerance, respect, peace and unity. And this conference over the last few years has become so important in bringing all of us together to recognise the work we have done and the work we must do to ensure that these principles are very much how all of us live our lives. So let me end by, again, thanking the Allo Bates Society for organising this event, but also thanking all of you for supporting its aims. We must work together, all of us, to make sure that this country that all of us are proud to call home is that place where tolerance and respect are the hallmarks of everything we do. So thank you all very much indeed.